Hello and welcome to my RMQ Regional Major Qualification video. I'm going to talk about all the different teams that did and didn't qualify from sort of the individual RMQs for each different region. First off is I believe the Oceania region. Yes, pretty much Australia throughout the board. And I'm going to be recording this roughly a week after it's happened. I did originally post. I had it ready, but I didn't like what I did. But for the moment, I'm going to just kind of go through each different team that at least that I can talk about in some way. First up, like I said, Oceania, we've got FlyQuest, who, as you can see, did qualify. Semper Fi, X-Talon, and Rooster. Now, nothing really I can say about Rooster or X-Talon. I did see Rooster play at Challenger Atlanta this past year in October, and X-Talon was the team that Talon signed, I believe, right before the Shanghai RMR. And they 1 or 2 months ago released the team, and because they said some VRS points, they still managed to get into the RMQ and did not qualify, as you can see in the Semper Fi. That is the team with Alistair, who was kicked from FlyQuest. You know what? Let's go over the bracket real quick. So here's the bracket. So opening round, Semper Fi takes out X-Talon 2-0. FlyQuest does the same as Rooster. And then in the lower final, Talon beats Rooster. Rooster gets knocked out. Semper Fi loses to FlyQuest. Semper Fi then beats X-Talon. And we'll click on the grand final page. FlyQuest did beat Semper Fi. And 13-7, 13-5, not really close. Alistair, no one really performed adequately. Liaz and Regali, pretty much everybody except maybe Inns, he did do, but everyone else put in a really good performance. So it's a bit sad that Alistair couldn't get in, but it would have been a huge shock if FlyQuest did not qualify to the Austin Major. Next up is the China qualifier. So right off the bat, 2 teams do qualify, 2 do not. Now Dog Evil, we'll get into them right now before we go to the bracket. They had a player who used an alternate account because his main account, if I remember correctly, had a VAC ban on it. And it wasn't revealed until, it was revealed before it started. As you can see, Tyler gets a free win. They had to forfeit the match because it is against the Valve rules. It's been like this since the inception of Valve-sponsored majors. That any team that, you have a player on it, that player cannot compete. And I guess the fact that he got this far is a bit odd. But it is what it is. We'll talk a little about maybe towards the end, maybe in another video, how I feel about the RMQs and the formats and stuff, and how Valve is handling the major side when it comes to scheduling. For right now, so Dog Evil gets out. Rare Adam, who qualified to Shanghai this past major, is out. And then we let's get to the bracket, because these two, we'll talk about them a little bit once we get to their matches. So Lin Vision gets a good win against Rare Adam. I won't say it's close. They at least got some rounds against Lin Vision. And then Tai Lu gets the win against Dog Evil. And then Lin Vision beats Tai Lu 2-1. And outside, actually, this was a decent matchup. If you're a fan of China or anything, or either of these teams, this is probably a good game. Somewhat close match. But Lin Vision punches ticket first. Rare Adam, because Dog Evil couldn't field the team in the disqualification, they get a free win. And so you go right to the consolidation final, and Tai Lu beats Rare Adam. And outside of the Anubis game, everything was kind of a blowout. Jam Young, Mercury were the top standout players for that match. And so it's Lin Vision. They qualify for their first major back in Copenhagen. Let's go click this. And I believe Westmelon was there. Zacher, I think he's the only one that's new. Let's click Starry's name. Let's go to the achievements. No, so outside of Call Me Sue, I'm assuming that's what his name is, everyone else was at the Copenhagen Major. And now we go over to Tai Lu. I think 1 or 2, they have been on Tai Lu for some time, or they've been in a major, but generally a very new team. So good for Tai Lu. It's their first major since Stockholm 2021, the first major after the pandemic, as you could say. But good for Lin Vision, good for Tai Lu. It's good that they're both getting back. It would have been nicer if Adam would have been able to go back to back, but it's just how the cookie crumbles. So good for both of these teams. Right, and then this sort of what is it? The Asia Regional, and it's outside of God's Reign. It's a Mongolian lineup, and I know very little about any of these teams. I believe the Huns were at the Blast Open. I think that was it. I think that's their only real that I know of, appearances in like mainstream CS. They don't know a lot about these teams. Let's go through the brackets. So opening round, Chinkus Warrior, easy 2-0. That's somewhat easy. Other than Ancient Inferno was kind of an easy win for them. And then the Huns, yes, this is the team that was at Blast Open 9-9. That's his name. I'm not sure. He had a good clip with the Deagle shot on Dust 2. Forget which team. Maybe it was G2. I don't remember. And then Bartak, he was on the Mongols. He's on the Huns team. He was on the Mongols for a little while. Nobody really here that I know of that's been on any of the other teams. And then God's Reign, probably one of the better teams out of India, maybe the best. And then you have Score, who is a member of the Mongols. So they get an easy 2-0 against God's Reign. Pretty easy. Hell yeah. Blowout City on Ancient and near Blowout City on Anubis. You go down to the lower bracket. Huns. No, God's Reign knocks out the Huns. I misspoke. And then we go to the upper final. Eruption, who beat Chingus Warriors, which we'll get to in a little bit, beats them 2-0. Ancient was close, kind of a middling effort by Chingus on Anubis. And so then Chingus has to go to the consolidation. They beat God's Reign 2-0, easily beating God's Reign. And then they get, you can almost call it a reverse sweep. It is a reverse sweep. I don't know what the map picks are, but it is. The close match on Mirage, and then fairly close efforts on Dust 2 and Nuke. And this is Chingus Warrior's first ever major. And like I said, I am unaware if any of these players ever qualifying it. Their world ranking isn't too bad, unless it's for Asia. The world ranking 49 is pretty good, but good for them. Good for if they are an organization. It'll be a good cash influx for them, and a little bit of a legacy builder for Mongolia, which is now fielding 2 teams in a major. Mongols, who of course, due to their high standing in qualifying for playoffs at Shanghai, they get a direct invite to the Legend Stage, quote unquote, Stage 3 of the major. So good to see that these teams are doing well. As just said, Chingus Warriors is qualified, so you've got 4 teams from Asia going in. Yes, 4 teams. So that covers sort of the Oceania Asian side. Let's get to the beefiest part of the RMQ, the European bracket. Okay, a lot to unpack here. So you had 16 teams, only 6 qualified. And if you try to ignore what's happening on the right, you'll sort of keep things okay. But let's see. I want detailed view. So right off the bat, 500. Oof, try to make this bigger, probably in post because it is small. They're a team that have been a lot of hacking accusations, wall hacks, radar hacks, all that. And they only managed to put up in the first 2 best of ones 9 rounds total. We go to the Gamer Legion match. Let's have a look. Only managed to put up 4 rounds the entire time in the elimination. So pretty bad. So that's what, 4 rounds right there? Can we go back, please? Yes, we can. Detailed view. So they managed to only put up 13 rounds altogether. Yeah, I did my math right, folks. I can count. 13 rounds. And geez, at least show up. And maybe the accusations are true. I don't know. And then probably my biggest surprise was a Paravision. We'll close that because that's with Jamin Kicker, and then I'd have to look at the team. Open link a new tab. Yes, because that's and then Travis, who's on Omcall, and then we'll pronounce him, and then Noda. I'm not sure who he was with before. Travis with the long call at Copenhagen, and so it's just sad that I honestly thought they would do better because it looked like James has been really playing really well since sort of relegating his in-game leading duties to kicker. But let's go over it. So they lose to Heroic, lose to Astralis, and they lose a 2-1 debate, who would, if you're paying attention, did qualify to a major. It's just a bit sad. I really thought they were going to do like at least, if not qualify, at least make a good run at it. So it's a bit sad to see that they sadly are knocked out. Now Fnatic, a team that was at Shanghai last year, weren't at Copenhagen earlier in the year, and it's sort of an it's up and down. They get blown out by BC Game, who are embroiled in their own drama now. Fnatic beats Gamer Legion, so they're in 1-1. They lose in an overtime match, which I will click. We will figure this out. How close was it? So 7-5, 5-7, and then it just the Fnatic just crumbles in overtime. 4-1. That's no bueno. And then Fear Borup, who replaced Crims for the event. Apparently, Crims is not benched. There was just some kind of personal issue that he had. He had to take care of, or nothing serious, I would hope. I don't know. So that he had something come up and he just couldn't compete. And Borup did fine, 17-17. He isn't the reason why they lost. Fear, who was the in-game leader, he didn't play very well. I think it was just that Blame F just didn't show. He just wasn't a factor, a main factor. 1.5 rating is it's not terrible, but if he's your star rifler, you've got to have at least a positive 5 KD. And with Exile, +8, that's what Blame F needed to do. He needed to have a game just like Exile. And then Boomage, who's the in-game leader, really just, 1.19 is really good. It is only +1, but that means the impact is good. And look at the kill assist, survived or traded, really highest in the server. So good for him. Boomage, this will be his third major in a row. His first with BetBoom's first, but it'll be Boomage and Exiles a few in a row. They didn't make Paris, but it's their first since the launch of CS2. Let's put it that way. And then Siren, who was a Team Spirit guy for a couple majors, made the playoffs both times when he was with Spirit. Magnajaz, an up-and-coming player, didn't play his best. And then Zorte, I believe their opera, not a good look. But when you've got performances like Boomage and Exile, and they're getting good ADR, they're putting up good ratings, and they just probably had a better game plan because Boomage is still a very good in-game leader. There's a reason why he won Stockholm and almost won in Antwerp. It was close. So good for them. Sad to see that Fnatic won't be going back. They did lose to ENCE 2-1. We'll get to them in a little bit. And then BC Game. So outside of a dominating win on Fnatic, they kind of just fell apart, I guess you could say. Lost to Metasport, and then a 14-6 loss to Big. That's no good, and they lose to. Let's look at the match. Kind of blowout city on Mirage. Yeah, you can't even get a T side. Your bums, and then closer game on Train. Now, BC Game has qualified for Dallas, but they're sort of in a rough pickle now because Jacob's been benched because of his gambling issue that he's had for apparently some time now, where he's either lost skins that he was gambling with other people's skins, or hasn't paid people back, so he's in his own mess. They need to field somebody. I think they should get Casanito. He played with Knock back in Apex for close to a year, I believe. And they did qualify when Apex still had that roster in Copenhagen. I think he would just be a good fit. And overall, I think he was with BC Game previously too. So he's available. Maybe he's on the bench. I don't know, or just a stand-in for Dallas. We'll see. It's just a bit sad because BC Games I believe, have done pretty decently in the CCT tournaments. They've had some good results, some good prize money they've gotten. But yeah, so they fought a 1-3 and they're out. And then Probably the biggest surprise is the Gamer Legion loss. They lose to Namiga, who does qualify for the major. After some, 3-1. That's not bad. We'll get to them. But yeah, and then lose to Fnatic 13-8. Let's look at that Fnatic match. We won't look over, we kind of briefed over the 500 stuff. And then, yeah, very weak. Look at this. 3 rounds on Anubis on T side. I'd have to go back and watch that match to figure out what went wrong. And then they put up an okay CT side, but the lead was just too much. 5 rounds maybe in a row. It looks like no one puts up a good KD. Everyone's in the negative. 2 players had okay ratings, and then just PR and GTR just did not show up. And then Mattias shows up here. Jambo shows up. Fear and Borup, did okay. But this is what you need to see if you want Fnatic to do it. You've got to see at least Blame F and the Opper and Mattias. One of them has to have an amazing game, and 2 of them did. He had an okay game, but you had 2 of them. They showed up, they played well, and it's just an overall good showing from Fnatic. Then they lose 2-1 Saw, and then they get knocked out. Just a big surprise. They would get playoffs at Melbourne. They lost to Falcons, who would go on to the finals. So, the season isn't really over. They're still invited to some events. It's a matter of just keep getting those VRS points. Try to just get a direct qualification to wherever the X major is. We'll find out about that hopefully soon. It's not been announced yet. I've heard that it's in Hungary. We'll see what happens. But for now, a bit sad for Gamer Legion. Now let's move on to Big, who kind of like in this weird purgatory where they can get to tier 1 events and they get 1 or 2 wins, and then that's all they can do. They're stuck in between tier 1 and tier 2, and they started off rough. They lost to 9 Pandas, who would just bench their whole roster after the RMQ, so that's not a good look for Big. And then as we saw earlier, they just blow the crap out of 500. And they win an overtime over BC game. So at this point, they're 2-1, and all they need to do is beat Namiga. And they can't do that. Let's look at that match. So close game on Inferno, 13-11, and it was Big's pick. All right. It's not a good look, and then you go to Dust 2, Namiga's pick, and then they just can't stop anything on CT. It's an avalanche of T rounds for Namiga. 10-2 is no bueno, and then Big gets 1. I wanted to say that wouldn't have made any sense, and so yeah, it's just bad. They got to the second stage of the major. It's Shanghai. They battled up to it. So I'd say what sucks the most about this is just that because Big has been trying, they've missed so many majors after Rio because they missed Paris, they missed Copenhagen. I'd say what the worst about this is that because they missed Paris and they missed Copenhagen, they got to Shanghai. Things look better, and they got 2 new pieces they added, Hyped and another player whose name escapes me. Let's just go down here. It was QB, who, yeah, there's not much. I don't know if you bench him. I'm not sure if he's really playing. Let's look at his stats. Oh, yeah, I don't know if this is it. I don't know if he's the guy you want, on the roster because yeah, no one really played great, but at least the negative differential wasn't too bad. And then just like its ADR is so below everybody, and then negative 19 is just so rough. But yeah, that's Big. They did lose to Astralis 2-1. But I'll talk about that. Let's move on to the other 2-3 team. Let's look at Saw. So lost to Bet Boom 13-3. They got an over. These are all teams. These first 2 teams are teams that qualified for the major. So Saw beats Bay in overtime, double overtime, I should say. They lose a close game to 9 Pandas, who benched their roster after this. So They weren't exactly a great team. And then they beat Gamer Legion in the elimination match, and they fought 2-0 to Ents. So let's look at this. Oof. Ents, very close match. Ents gets a 16-14 win, overtime win on Ancient, and then Ents gets a pretty good win on Train, 13-10. So just a rough start of the year for Saw. They sort of benched a bunch of their players. I think Muteris and Story are the only ones left. You can count Agil as one guy, but he sort of came in. I forget who they benched. They benched somebody. But either way, it just sucks because they're always like one step away from qualifying, or they're right on the precipice of doing it, and they just can't bring it over the line. So rough start for Saw for the whole year. Now let's move on to Nine Pandas. Now I've heard been saying they benched their roster. So yeah, they beat Big, OG, which we haven't really talked about yet, which is a bit odd. I think we would have been able to talk about them yet, but we will. They did qualify, as you can tell, 3-0, easy qualification. But the Nine Pandas beat Big. They lose to OG. They beat Saw, so they're one away. They're one away from qualifying. So they lose 2-1 to Bet Boom and lose 0-2. Now I'm more interested in the 2-1 to Bet Boom. This is 2-1 stage. Winner qualifies. So Bet Boom 13-3s them on Anubis. Nine Pandas 13-5 win on Dust 2. So right now these teams are pretty even in terms of their round differentials. But it's just, they go to Nuke. Pandas has a rough CT. They only get 5, which isn't terrible, but you at least want 7 or 8 on CT side of Nuke, especially if it's like is it a cider or it's your map pick. And then Bet Boom has this, they have a good CT. I only allow 2 T-round victories. Just a rough go for them. A bit sad to see that the team benched the roster. And then, as we said, Bait won 2-0. They went on to the 6th place, or 8th place is the 8th place decider. Now let's close out these tabs. Go on to Ents. Now Ents had an okay tournament. I should say they didn't qualify, but wins against 500, which, considering how bad 500 was, is kind of an indictment. It's sort of maybe they aren't. It wasn't good. It was a up and down event. Because considering everyone else destroyed 500, it's a bit sad to see that they got 7 rounds against him. But right here, Ents lost to eventual qualification team Heroic, and then they lost 13-3 to a Astralis team that was sort of dead, that would prove to be dead afterwards. And then Fnatic, they get eliminated. No, they beat Fnatic 2-1, eliminate them. And they beat Saw 2-0, so you would think, well, they got 3 wins. That's not true. They did get 3 wins. They didn't get enough because they are having to play in the 8th/6th place decider match because there's only 6 spots available. So it's a bit sad that they couldn't qualify. And I believe if we go, here we go. They lost to Bait, and generally everything was close up until Ancient because Bait gets the win, 13-11 on Mirage, and then Anubis. It's an Ents map. Maybe probably was their pick if I had to guess. They beat Bait 13-9, then it goes to Ancient, and then it's just Ents can't keep up. They lose 13-7. And now we're getting into teams that. Ooh, actually, we got one more, and that's Astralis. And as you've been able to tell, Cadian's benched. Hooksy was brought in. They're not showing it, but he was brought in to replace him because they lost first to OG, who did qualify, beat Paravision, beat Ents, lost to Metasport, which was a close game, I believe. No, I'm sorry. It was kind of up and down because Astralis lost in their pick of Inferno, which I don't even want to call it their pick because it really isn't. They're not the best. And then we go to Mirage, where Astralis beats Metasport 13-7, emphatic win, and then Metasport just squishes them 13-9. And they had a lead going into it. Astralis had a good, T side going into it, but there just weren't enough rounds for them to just keep it together, which is a bit sad, but it is what it is. But if we go to Metasport, we have a lot of ex-NIP players going to a major. You have Hampus, Plopsky, and Isaac, who didn't go to a major for NIP, but he was on NIP before he was released when they did the whole rebuild with NIP with Snappy and U-Jerks and all those other players on that team. So it's good to see that Metasport's going into their first ever major. Get a cool Viking ship sticker. Nice circular sticker, so good for them. And then, here we go. Astralis beats Big. Because they had more VRS points, I believe that's why I get to the 6th place decider. And the same problem we kind of have. So this is the inverse of what we just saw against Metasport. So Bait gets a close win on Mirage. Astralis bounces back on Inferno. Really strong CT side. Shaky T side. And then we get to the Ancient map. Astralis has a nice lead to start. And I believe Astralis, I think they got up to round 11. And they just couldn't get anything done on T side. They eventually do force the overtime, as you can see. And then Bait just, I believe, Alex 666 1 versus 3 to win the match and qualify them for the major. So good for Bait. Also featuring another former NIP player in Head Trick. In NPL, he gets to go to his first major since Paris, and he was with a Navi. And a bunch of new people, I believe. Alex 66, I saw it essential. Honestly, it's essential, but I don't know. And then Kenzior. So good for them. And look at NPL, plus 12. Carried his team over the finish line. So good for Bait. Speaking of Bait, here's Bait. So let's look at this. So they started out 0-2. Lost to Metasport and Saw. Metasport we just discussed. They qualified. They beat Paravision. They beat BC and they beat 9 Pandas. And they go to the 8 position and they beat Ent and they beat Astralis. Yeah, so I sort of went over them just briefly over the one over Astralis. So good for Bait. It's their first ever tournament. As an organization, they've gotten close multiple times. So it's good to see that they're qualifying for a major. In Metasport, we sort of went over. They beat Bait, they beat BC, lost to OG in the qualifier match, and they beat Astralis 2-1. So good for them. I'm going to have both of these real quick. And then Bet Boom beat Sol 13-4, lost to Namiga, who actually did qualify. And they beat Fnatic and they beat 9 Pandas. So the only teams that they lost to were teams that qualified for the major. So good luck for Bet Boom. And then Amiga, they beat Gamer Legion. They beat Bet Boom, as we just discussed. And then Heroic, which you not really talked about too much. Heroic beats them. Let's click that match page. So a good look. 13-8 from Heroic, and then Heroic wins in overtime, 16-13. It's not a bad showing from the team, but not the best, not enough to get you in. Then they beat Big 2-0, and they qualify to the stage 1 of the major. So good thing for them. It's their first official major sticker. They had an RMR sticker back in 21 that became very popular. I won't tell you why, but you probably know why it became very popular. So good luck for the organization overall. And then OG, this is their first major since Paris, where they sort of floundered out. I think they went 0-3 or 1-3. That was where Flame Z was before he was, I think, signed or was a free agent and went to Vitality. But a good overall look, 13-8 over Astralis, 9 over 9 Pandas, and then 2 over Metasport. So good for them. And then Heroic. Oh, Heroic. Probably my favorites to get out of stage 1 and possibly even get to Legend stage. But let's say they beat Paravision and Ents and they beat Namiga, so you sort of went over. So a good overall victory for Heroic. They sort of signed the core of Sangal, who almost qualified or got close to qualifying for the Shanghai major. So good for them. It's Pius gets back on a major stage. His first since Paris. Yes, his first since Paris. So good luck for them. And then let's see. That covers Europe. Yeah, that covers it. So we'll go over the winners. Heroic, OG, Metasport, BetBoom, Namiga, and Bait are your teams out of the European RMQ. So good for them. Then we'll get to the South American RMQ. And you've got Solid, Red Canids with the Cold Zero lineup, who recently benched Henny and Phelps. They're out. Sharks, it's sort of an average team. They qualified for Stockholm forever ago. Audic, a team that was at Challenger Atlanta last year, and then Legacy, one of the typically better teams of Brazil. They've been playing in the North American Challenger League for this whole season. I think because they've been living in America. And then Bestia, it's their first major ever, or as an organization, and I believe Imperial did qualify. Has it qualified for about every major they've been able to qualify for? I think. Well, I should say they've not missed a major since qualifying for their first one. I think that's true. And then Fluxo, who last major was in Paris. And this, you know what? We're going to do two things. We're going to open up two new tabs. So I do want to talk about both teams. So Imperial, let's check out the achievements. Yeah, so Antwerp, Rio, Copenhagen. They did not make Paris, which isn't terrible. So they've made, since qualifying for Antwerp, they've made every major sans Paris. But overall, they've made every major since CS2's come out. And they've got, I forget where Try comes from, but Vinny's been on the roster for a hot minute. Nobody's been on the roster for a hot minute. I think Che Jesus is new. But good for Imperial. It's always nice to see that they've qualified. They've kind of a cool logo. And now we'll get to Fluxo. And Fluxo has Art, who is on Furia, was benched or removed, had some drama with that. And then we have, I believe this is Kai or Key. He was on Furia as a stand-in for a few months. Didn't play the best. And he ended up coming to Fluxo, and he's done well. Zevi, who was on Pain, he was benched or was acquired. Whatever happened with this. And so you sort of have these, cast-offs from Brazilian teams, and they sort of come together on Fluxo. And I think Fluxo has a chance to get to stage 2. And my hot take is that I think Furia, either if they don't get a European in-game leader, and I would think they will, because they're sort of going more in a more international direction. But if they do, they have to go to the European RMQ, or they have to get someone from Oceania, or from North America, or Brazil. And I think Art, if he has a good showing with this roster, I think Furia buries the hatchet. Maybe he buries the hatchet, and he goes back to Furia. That's my hot take, probably for this video, is that I think Art goes back to Furia, the roster that he sort of built and made tons of playoffs with in the majors and other events, years ago, just a few years ago. I think he's the piece to help bring back the aggressiveness that Furia needs. And if he's as aggressive as he was on Furia, he'll be able to take some of the load off of Yakinder, who was recently acquired from Team Liquid after they benched Skulls. So I think if you can get two aggressive, you get him and you've got two aggressive players, I think you've got a decent roster that'll just make Furia a great team again, like they were a few years ago, where they were at least contending for titles. Unlike the team that is now, where they're a middling average team that qualifies for Tier 1 events and they don't do anything. They don't make playoffs. They're very average. They're very unoffensive. They don't do anything. So I think this is the big signing for me. But let's get back to the brackets. So we had two groups. Fluxo starts out 2-0 for Bestia, and the Legacy 2-0s Red Canids. Bestia would then eliminate Red Canids 2-0. Fluxo beats Legacy 2-0, and they qualify them for the major. And Imperial beats Odic 2-0. Sharks beats Solid 2-0, and then Odic beats Solid 2-0 and eliminates them. And Imperial beats Sharks 2-0, and that qualifies them for the major for the last spot in the single elimination bracket. Bestia beats Sharks 2-0, and Legacy beats Odic 2-1. And typically my rule is that if you beat a team on less maps, sort of like 2-0 here and then 2-1, you're probably going to win the event. The next match, and lo and behold, look what happened. Bestia 2-0, Legacy 2-1, look who won. Bestia won. So it's the first ever Argentinian team and organization to ever qualify for a major. So overall, I think we've got a good storyline in Fluxo. I think it makes the most sense for him to go back to Furia. I think if Fluxo will get a bunch of money out of this, it's a win-win for either party. And it's just a matter of, does Furia want to accept the whole thing with Art, and his criticism of the organization that he had? Time will tell. I don't know, but I would like to see it. I think it'd be a fun move to see in CS. And now my favorite one, you know what it is because I'm from North America. I am an American. It's the North American qualifier. And boy, was it juicy. So Blue Jays beats Marsborn 2-1. Marsborn is a very much a Challenger League team. I think they did some CCT. I'm not sure. And the NRO, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'm in the elimination brackets. So let's see. So Complexity beats Getting Info 2-0. Getting Info is a good team. They were the rumored TSM lineup. And they've had some good results on like online events. They're a very strong team. They lost to Complexity. Blue Jays, that's the former, most recent boss lineup. Blue Jays acquired them for free because it was an Orgless team. They beat Might 2-1. Getting Info, then in the lower bracket, beats Might 2-0, and then Complexity beats Blue Jays to qualify for the major. And it's an overtime win on Ancient, and then it's just Complexity is a very strong team on Train. 13-7 win on Train. And then we get down to the B group, and then Wildcard beats Marsborn 2-0. Energy beats Nouns. And then Marsborn beats Nouns. Nouns is a team that has struggled to get funding from the Nouns organization. They proposed a budget, and I believe the budget failed twice. So I'm not saying that roster is here for long, but at some point I wouldn't be surprised if the team disbands. Because at some point, if you're not playing, if you can't get even to a major or even to to lands, it's hard to keep. Maybe I'll just retire and I'll get a real job. Or I'm going to go back to university. I don't want to play anymore. It's just not fun. So we'll see what happens with now. Nothing's happened yet. And then Wildcard beats NRG 2-1. And then Wildcard, as you can see, qualified for the major. Now we'll get to the simulation single elimination bracket. As I said, Blue Jays beats Marsborn 2-1. NRG beats Getting Info 2-1. And then NRG just decimates Blue Jays on Train. And it's 13-4, I believe. Blue Jays got 3 rounds to start the half. They got 1 round after, and then it really was Blowout City. And then Dust 2, it was. Let's go to the match page. So as you can see, NRG, they had like 7 or 8 in a row. Like it was a stomp of a stomp against Blue Jays. And then it really just flipped on its head. Energy just could not maintain sights. So it was tough going for the team. But once it switched over to overtime, Energy was like, you know what, we are gonna win this. We know we can win this, and they just threw the hammer down on Blue Jays. Made those birds extinct is what they did. And they get to their first major since Berlin 2019 and their first as an org as the org comes back into CS2. It's a good look for NRG. It's a great look for Complexity, who had a great result in Bucharest right before this event, and a good look for Wildcard, who's not done a lot this year, mainly because of lack of invites to VRS events. But overall, the teams that really needed to qualify did. Blue Jays would have been nice, but they're still a new organization, and seems like they've been a bit up and down as of recently. But it was a must-win qualification for NRG, a must for Complexity, and then Wild Card, which it would have. I don't know if it would have been bad. They probably would have maybe made a change if there was an issue, or who knows what would have happened with Wildcard. But it's nice to see that they're going back to their second major in a row, and they've looked good. They beat NRG, I believe, in the Astana qualifier. Or maybe Blue Jays did that. I think Blue Jays was beaten by Wildcard in the grand final. So it's a good look for all these teams. Now let's see. Let's go have a look at the sort of finished result of all the teams, and I will make my predictions there. All right, after doing some negotiating with my search page history, I found what I was looking for. So my predictions for teams that will qualify to Stage 2, they'll face some tough competition, I'm not going to lie. Falcons, who probably need to be in Stage 3 because of how well they've been playing. You could probably take out G2 instead, but hey, rules are rules. Everything happened before. I believe Falcons they won their event in Bucharest and had a very close grand final that they lost to Vitality earlier, technically today, but I guess earlier today in Melbourne, their day. But anyway, this is the focus. So my picks: Heroic qualifies, Bet Boom qualifies. So 8 teams are going through. OG, I'm gonna say yes. I'm gonna say Heroic, OG, Bet Boom. I'm gonna say Fluxo gets through. That's 4. I'm gonna say Complexity gets through pretty easily. That's 5. I'm going to say Wildcard gets through. That's 6. I want to say NRG, but it's going to be difficult. It's going to be tough. So Heroic, OG, Bet Boom, Fluxo. Oof. This is where it's getting tough. Say Metasport. I'm going to say Metasport. So Heroic, Metasport, OG, Bet Boom, Fluxo, Complexity, Wildcard. I got room for one more spot. I'm going to say I really want to pick NRG. They're dark horse pick. In the event, maybe, but I think FlyQuest. I think they're a much better team than any of the teams coming out of the Asia region. Asia region. I can't talk. So, but good look. This is it. Final prediction: Heroic, OG, BetBoom, Metasport, Fluxo, Complexity, Wildcard, and FlyQuest. That should be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So it's a bit sad. I would like Energy to do better, but I think it's just you have teams that are just in a better position at the moment. So that's my predictions. Let me know what your predictions are, what you thought of the my breakdown of everything. Hopefully it wasn't too rambly. And this I feel a bit more confident in this take that I've recorded. So probably what I'll do is have some little deathmatch video in the background the whole time. But thank you for watching. I look forward to hearing from you. Please like the video, and if you like this, what I will be doing is I will be recording little videos of my predictions for each stage coming up. So, and what I'll sort of to sweeten the pot, if I get my predictions wrong, if I don't get enough points to get the next level of coin for that stage, I'm going to open up some of the old major containers. I've got some stuff from the Berlin Katowice stuff, and I believe I've got stuff from Krakow, and I believe Cologne 2016. So I've got some old stuff. I'm going to go look through, see what I got for containers. Maybe I'll open up some souvenir packages too if I can't get any other stuff. So that's what I'll do to help sweeten the pot, for you to watch. But until then, you have a good rest of your day or night, whenever you're watching, and I'll see you later.